Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Geeks of Rage Podcast, where we like to talk about anything games and geek-related. Today, I have a friend and fellow community member from our lovely old people group, the Gamers Over 30 group, none other than Mr. Chili Dad. Welcome to the podcast, my man. Nonetheless, we are here today to talk about Faxanadu, but prior to that, we just want to get, for those that are either new to the channel, because I know we've had some new subscribers as of late, but also those that are just new to your presence here now on the podcast, just give them a little bit of yourself, like a little bit of your backstory, so to speak, is what got you into gaming as far as when, and maybe what was the original consoles you started with, and, kind of go from there. So, have at it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me again. So, I started out with the old Atari, of course, the 2600 way back when with my father who introduced me into gaming to begin with. And, I can't remember much titles, of course, from the Atari, I'd say. But I think there was a racing game, I think, that the one that I remember out of the console for that era.
I'm just going to throw out Pole Position, too, because it seemed like
There
everybody
it
that
is.
I know
Yeah.
had that game that had an Atari back in the day.
That must be the one. Yeah, a racing game. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the one I remember from that generation. But yeah, the bulk of my existence was the NES, and for that it was the ripe old age of 6 when we finally got our hands on one. I mean, I guess I don't know the story from my father's side because he was the one who got it back then. But and so Super Mario came with Mario Duck Hunt, of course. So playing that a lot when we first had it, and then. I mean, my father obviously huge influence in getting me into gaming, and then just I was hooked even from a child, and just it's been there ever since. So it's just been so you talk about the constants in your life, is just video games just been a constant for as long as I remember. So
No, I totally get it. And it's funny because I'm in the same boat. Like we had an Atari, but it's hilarious because we had one, but like my parents didn't like us playing it. They didn't like because like my dad didn't even like it. He got it, I guess, as a graduation gift, and it's just collected dust because he's like, yeah, I don't play this shit, and freaking, So, but we had just a few games for it. Pitfall, Pole Position, Frogger, and Centipede, and Junior Pac-Man. I think those were the games we had. But I enjoyed the Atari back in the day, and I do know that obviously, as much as I hate saying this, there are some games, sadly, that don't age well or didn't age well, and even stuff that I might have loved on the Atari back then, I probably don't love now, but I can, at least say there are still some titles that I can get enjoyment from playing on the Atari. And the NES, that I did not have. A neighbor across the street from me had an NES, and we got a Genesis when I was about 7 years old. So it was about 93 when we got ours. Christmas of 93, we got ours. And so I would play Nintendo at his house and then play the Sega at my house. Or for the snobs out there, I'm sorry, there's no such thing as a Nintendo. It's an NES. And there's no such thing as a Sega. It's a Genesis. I'm sorry. But
yeah, it's Sega Genesis 32 bits.
Yeah. Is that the high definition graphics, or was it the high definition audio? Whatever the fuck it was that was printed on the old school ones.
Yeah, they were trying to push at the time. Yeah. Well, it's interesting for me. It was actually, and for the NES, it's such a great game for us to go over because the NES was actually the console I had the longest because didn't get an SNES, didn't get a Genesis. The main exposure of my Genesis time was through my cousin who had one, so that's how I got exposed to. And of course, like of course the Sonic titles, but the other one I recall very vividly was Biohazard, which was a side-scrolling shooter, and it was like you're in ships and you could like get upgrades that change your ship's appearance. Yeah, that was a fun one too.
Yeah.
But totally missed those generations. Then went from NES to 64. So actual like owned consoles.
Oh yeah.
Not a great history, but having to go back a lot to revisit stuff after. But yeah.
No, I get it because like, well, here's the thing. Like this is, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much on this, but it's just funny because and it's not like me trying to sound like that typical older guy, like, oh, back in my day, this, that, and the other thing. But in all seriousness, I feel like those of us that either, were born in the 80s but grew up in the 90s, or were born earlier in the 80s and were at least able to remember some of the 80s going into the 90s and stuff, or even, possibly maybe even being born in the latter 70s going through, just going through the Atari to now age of gaming, seeing the entire progression. Like, I know we have that appreciation for it because we've seen it, but like, when I try talking to like my nephews and stuff about it, they look at me like, you're a fucking idiot. And it's like, you don't understand. It's like, we went from basically looking at shit that, was like flat paper graphics to even when we went from like SNES and Genesis graphics to going to the first original polygon shit for PS1, Saturn and 64. I mean, it blew our fucking minds, because we're like, oh my God, this looks so crazy, because it was brand new and we didn't like, and for the times you're going from straight flat graphics to that. And I wasn't even sure that the first generation 3D graphics would even look that good. You know what I mean? And that's why I tried explaining to him. I was like, that's what you guys don't get. Like, yeah, of course, it doesn't look great in comparison to something that's made now, but you got to look at, if you were like, that's how I tried telling them. I'm like, think about like, if you went from, it'd be like going from what you know now to like having a machine that's like VR and you walk into it. That would be like the progression steps. You know what I mean? You're going from that to that, and you're going, whoa, what just happened? And, just all the dimensions from a controller standpoint. You go from just doing stuff from a 2D standpoint to now you're using, like with the 64, you're using a joystick to try to do these things from a three-dimensional standpoint, and using the C buttons as your what we refer to now as the right stick to control the camera and stuff like that. And then even with the PlayStation 1 having the analog sticks, and they just don't have an appreciation for it, and they're just like, it's old, it's bullshit. And I'm like, oh, come on.
Exactly. And do you recall back then too, because what I'm recalling right now is it was the fight between like kids on the playground. Like, it would be a meme war, you think, in modern times, of like the PS1 with the like photorealism, because that's what it was. Like, it was all flat, but like with stuff like Mortal Kombat, it was like, oh my God, it's so realistic. And then they were comparing it to the N64, like, Super or Mario 64 with the, like, everything's all triangle shaped, and they're like, oh, what's this? Like comparing the graphics. It was like, dude, matter, like it's all the same.
I loved it all. That I was never, and that's the thing, I never got caught up in that like some of my buddies did, and I was like, I just like to play video games, man. If it's fun, I'm playing it. I don't give a shit. I'm not gonna be some elitist guy. The only thing that I get caught up in now is just in hindsight, like when people ask, what would you say is better, the PS1 or the 64? And as much as I absolutely love the N64 and love a lot of titles on it, I would be lying if I said that I liked it overall better than the PS1, because the amount of games I loved on the PS1, plus the overall catalog for the PS1, just the amount of top tier games that came out on it, it's just hands down, it was just way ahead of the 64. But, they both...
Yeah, and it's like, you think about how it's almost like the N64 was like, everyone always... It's like the nostalgia console. It's like, everyone's always like, oh... Like, it's such a high, like, oh, I remember it so well. But then it's the PlayStation. Everyone's like, that's where everyone says that's where the great games were, right? Like, the really ones that everyone loved playing.
That's exactly right. And, like, my wife, she's not, like, a huge gamer or anything, but she doesn't understand that, because she loves the N64, but because she loves Mario Party and Mario Kart and stuff like that, which I get, because I love them, too.
The social games, right?
Exactly, and obviously, because those are ones we played as kids and shit like that. But I just tried telling her, I was like, but the games that you like, that you would find as like the quote unquote geeky, nerdy games like RPGs and stuff like that, I was like, of course, you're not going to like those. And a lot of those came out on the PlayStation 1. And, that's where my mind always went. I always loved that type of stuff. But going back to try to get us back onto Faxanadu. So what got you into it? What got you into Faxanadu to begin with?
Well, of course, back in the day it was rentals, right? Like
Oh
my
yeah.
father managed to afford a
Yeah.
Nintendo, but then it was, well, if you want new games, we got to rent them and we got to try them, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, and I think it was my father who got it one day, and of course, interesting. I was a bit of a reversal because it was he actually who was like, I don't like it. It's too hard. He doesn't like it. And then as I started playing it, and I think I'm pretty sure I'd played Zelda first. So Faxanadu was after Zelda, and I was like, oh, like it kind of feels like Zelda 2. Like let's keep going with this, right? And yeah, just I kept pushing, and I just remember my father kept coming in, being like, "You still playing it? Are you getting somewhere?" And I'm like, "I think so. Like I feel like I'm getting somewhere."
Yeah.
And like the mantras, right? Like every city you get the mantra. Like I had this sheet of paper with all these mantras written all over it, like to remember the passwords.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
exactly.
everything. And like I don't know if I beat it way back when, but I definitely played a ton of it when I was little. So
Yeah. I was feeling it out. I was like, all right, it's actually not bad for when it came out, which it came out in 1987. But well, I should say it came out 87 in Japan and 88 in America. But nonetheless, for a game that came out when it did, it's actually it's not bad at all for like I guess you could say it's among the first in the like we'll call it first gen video game RPGs because for what people don't know or may not know, video game RPGs were actually relatively new when it came to like the latter 80s and stuff. There wasn't really much out there, and most of the old school RPGs were actually just like text format. It was just like command based. So you would just here's the story and you're selecting stuff, but you're not physically moving the character. You weren't doing all these things. You were just going through a series of scenarios and then trying to pick the right thing to move along. But
do you remember the King's Quest series
I
back in the day?
I know what it is, but I never played it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
old school text based, and
Yeah.
like you had the little picture up top, and then
Yep.
all the words on the bottom, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Playing a game like this, I'm like, wow, like in hindsight, I'm going, holy shit, like this is really well put together for a game of its time when there really wasn't a whole hell of a lot to base off of. Because as we know, not saying video games is like a copycat thing, but it's always you go off of what was previously out to build off of, you know what I mean? So there
Yeah.
wasn't really anything like this out at the time. And I can't remember when Zelda 2 came out. I don't know if it was before or after this. I'll look it
Yeah, I'm
up
not
in the
sure.
meantime and I'll pop it up on the screen and, put a little speech bubble up and say I'm a moron and say it was this. But anyways, uh,
We're old, we
none,
forget things.
yeah, I know it happens. There's so much. It's hard. You can't remember everything, but,
Yeah.
but it's very, it functions, of course it functions a little clunky, but you know, I would honestly say this is one of those games that it didn't age poorly. It's still something that I picked up and I did not find myself going, God, this is just painful to play. Like I didn't think that at all when I was going through and playing. And I was like, I kept actually just wanting to progress. That's what it was. I was getting just frustrated. Like, okay, I just need to do whatever I got to do to move along and get to the next phase, because from what I'm gathering from when I was playing it, it's not like it's level based, like it's level 1, level 2. It's you're going through the whole thing and that's the thing is you're going through this map and you got to remember where to go as you're progressing because you can get lost if you're not paying attention. But
Oh, easily.
yeah, and if you're not paying attention what the hell you're doing, you can get lost and but
Or you get stuck in doors that you don't have the key to get into, right?
yeah, and then there's that. Yeah, so you just basically need to. What I did, I cheated a bit after I was talking to you, and I said that I got stuck because I was like, "There's this jump," and I'm going, "What the fuck?" And it was something as simple as I had to use
Right.
magic, and I didn't know because this was one of those games where I would say I don't know if it did or didn't come with any sort of manual to kind of tell you what to do. But for a player, if you're just going in and you have no idea what the controllers are, well, you're probably not going to know how to use your magic and everything else. But
Yeah.
I figured it out after I kind of watched a walkthrough for a minute. I was like, there we go. Okay, I'm an idiot. And then I started playing again and got past it and started going again. But it it definitely, it's one of those games where I would say, I don't want to say it's easy and I don't want to say it's hard. It's just, it's got, I guess, the right amount of challenge to it because a lot of the enemies seem to be pattern based as far as like the way when they jump, some of them jump at you or the way they come at you in general. That's very pattern and timing based. So at first it might kind of fuck with you because you're not used to it. But then once you're figuring out, oh, okay, I see what they're doing, then you kind of figure it out and you kind of go from there. But overall, from where I got, because I don't know how far I got into it, I know I beat what I think was like the first boss. It was this big blue flying looking thing that was shooting fireballs at me.
Yeah, one of the goblins or
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah. So I killed that, got the first item there, and then I kind of was doing whatever, but was trying to move on past that. But that's as far as I got. But I plan on finishing it, which I actually want to do that for a stream on a retro day, is to just kind of play through it some more and, you know, people can watch me painfully play it. But that is my experience overall. Was there anything like from this game that kind of like either maybe inspired you in some sort of ways or opened the doors in certain ways to you for something else going forward because of playing this or anything like that?
I mean, I guess for me, like I've always been a story guy. Like that's my thing. Like I know even friends of mine would always talk about games that they didn't like for whatever reason. I was like, I liked it. The story was good, and that's why I think for me that was the thing I just loved about the story. It was, to me, even though it seemed like such a simple story and everything, it seemed like it could have had like a much bigger scale, right? Because it's the elves versus the dwarves. And, they're talking about how they're, choking the world tree, which is making everything suffer. So, and this is all outlined like pretty quickly too. Like it sort of tells you right in the opening sequence, right? Like, you're coming back to your home, which is in shambles and like, all of that. And of course it's always the nameless protagonist, right? And then I think that also is kind of like you try and fill yourself into the nameless protagonist. Overall I just felt like, and I mean, I'm again music guy too, like that
it did have good music for
an
8-bit game.
Town.
It actually did.
Yeah, it was good. But and then the other thing too, it's funny you talk about not knowing things and as I mentioned before, so I revisited it when it was in the virtual console for the Wii, and I was like, oh, I got to play this again, however many years later since I had played it the last time, and early on, it's one of those things where if you check the vendors in the cities, some of the stuff that you can get like way earlier if you just farm the gold for it. And one of the things you can get is that ranged magic ability, and I just remember like when I played the Wii version, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna farm this and get this right away, and it's just so strong, like early game, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, because I did notice that, and I didn't farm because I was actually I was trying, for the sake of the podcast, I was just trying to kind of push myself along so to get familiar with certain stuff. But yeah, when I seen certain items and I seen the prices for them, I'm going, what the fuck? So if it's this price, it means if I farm here and keep coming back and forth, then I'll be able to get that. It might take me a bit, but because that's the thing for those that are unfamiliar with the game. You're going through scenes basically, right? So when you get to the edge of the screen, it's going to transition to the next side of the screen, so to speak. So you'll have a new scene. But what you can do is kill the enemies on one scene and then walk backwards, and then those same enemies will respawn on the previous scene. So obviously you just go back and forth and you farm gold, killing all your enemies. And that's what we're referencing to. Just clarifying for those that might be unfamiliar with what the hell we're talking about or unfamiliar with the game is how are you farming in this game, but that's how. So just to go back to the story, like you were saying, I'm just going to read here what we got as far as the story goes. So the player controls the protagonist of Faxanadu, who is an unnamed wanderer who returns home. He has no name, though in the Japanese version allows the player to choose one. The game begins when he approaches Aeolus, I think that's how you pronounce it, his hometown, after an absence to find it in despair and virtually abandoned. Worse still, the town is under attack by dwarves, which is funny because it's like dwarves. It's like they always seemed like
the opposite,
right?
Yeah,
they're always needing help and shit like that. So Goes on to say the Elven King explains that the elves' fountain water, their life source, has been stopped, and all other remaining water has been poisoned, and provides the protagonist with 1,500 gold, which is obviously the game's currency, to prepare for his journey to uncover the cause. Then goes on to say, as the story unfolds, it is revealed that the elves and dwarves lived in harmony among the world tree until the evil one emerged from fallen meteorite. And then the evil one then transformed the dwarves into monsters against their will and set them against the elves. Surprise, surprise. So see, we knew all along the dwarves couldn't have done it themselves.
And it was Venom, obviously. Meteorites.
Yeah, exactly. It was Venom. There it is. Yeah, exactly. So it says the Dwarf King Grieve or Grieve, it's spelled Grieve. I'm going to say Grieve, I guess. Swallowed his magical sword before he was transformed, hiding it in his own body to prevent the evil one from acquiring it. It is
badass too, right?
Exactly, right? Like, man, you got to have some nuts. So it is only with this sword that the evil one can be destroyed. And then it says last that his journey takes him to 4 overworld areas. The trees buttress, I think that's how you pronounce that, buttress, the inside of the trunk, the tree's branches, and finally the dwarves' mountain stronghold. It was where you end up with. Going to the reception, let's just talk about the reception real quick to see what the critics had to say about it. This is not original reviews. This is newer reviews, so I don't know if we can actually trust this. But I see as of game rankings, as of right now, they gave it a score of 75% out of 100, which that's not bad. That's like saying 7.5 out of 10, which, that's
solid B.
Yeah, that's a fair shake, I would say. Yeah. For the overall experience. It's like, yeah, because like I was saying, yeah, you could knock it a little bit for slightly clunky game or controls. But again, you're talking about a game that was made in the late 80s and there wasn't a whole lot to go off of at the time. And, great music. So that bumps it up some because it was good music for an 8-bit game, went well. And, the overall gameplay I felt was very fun and engaging and kept you.
And even as a system, like definitely clunky for its time. Like I won't defend that by any means. But in my opinion, the one thing that it really was good mechanics, in my opinion, was the sword also always knocked your enemies back slightly. So it never would they couldn't always come at you. Like you could always keep them at range with your sword, and that was nice.
Yeah, I did see that because I was trying to figure out when I kind of skimmed through the walkthrough, like kind of what to expect or what I should be looking for. And I did see somebody having the sword, and I watched them knocking them back. I was like, oh, well, that would come in handy, down the line when I'm ready for it. All right, okay. So now I kind of know what to look for. But yeah, I totally get that. So just, I guess, a little factoid here. It says the game world is featured in 2 episodes of Season 2 of the Nintendo-based Saturday morning cartoon series Captain N, the Game Master. And it says they are in the, quote, the feud of Faxanadu and the episode The Germ Wars. It says the Elven King is named Melvis. Well, it was such a stupid name. And looks, nice. Yeah. It says, and looks and sounds like Elvis Presley for his first appearance. The voice was changed in the latter episode. The Dwarf King is not featured and is replaced by Queen Dwarfine. And then it goes on to say how it was re-released on the Wii in 2010 and 2011, it said.
Well, and the other sort of interesting piece to this that I know from the history is I think it's technically supposed to be like a side story to Xanadu, which is a different story that's related in some way, and that apparently has a bigger series in Japan, I believe. But
okay.
Yeah, so I remember trying to go down the rabbit hole to try and see, but I don't remember getting very far. I don't know if it's just because you gotta find the titles and play them to know, but yeah, I didn't really get much with that.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely one if you are into retro gaming and you also like RPGs and story-based type games like that, I would definitely say consider giving it a shot.
Yeah, and otherwise, I mean, just be cautious, right? I know for me, when I was playing the Wii version too, Like I was just constantly going back. Like as soon as I felt like I was getting too low on HP, I'd just go back to the town, refill on HP, go back
Yep.
again, and
Yep.
then just slow
Exactly.
roll it. Like that, as you learn the patterns and you know where everything is, you
Yep.
get further and further every time, and then that's how you progress, right?
Exactly. And you don't have to play it on the NES. I mean, I know, well, there's our elitist minded friends that like to say, "Oh, you got to play it on the original hardware for the real experience." Yeah, it's like you don't have to. I mean, and I'll be honest, as an adult, I'm not really a fan of the NES controller because it feels like my hands are too big for it, and I don't even have like monster hands or anything. But when I hold it, I'm going, "What the fuck is going on?" But
No, I agree. I
uh,
agree. We have an NES Classic upstairs too, and it's the same thing. I'm always like, "What is this tiny controller?"
it's like, yeah, and I get it. They made it for kids, and they weren't expecting grown folk to play it, but still, it's like, oh man. So you obviously can emulate it and use whatever controller you want.
So Hudson Soft, right, the publisher for the game as well. The again, I'd spent so long playing the NES. It's the only reason why I have the memories of this, which is a different game. I'm pretty sure it's completely unrelated, just same developer. Called Starship Hector, which was a vertical scrolling shooter, spaceship type game. And that one was also a challenge. Like I guess that was a theme when I was young, is finding hard games. But yeah, like that one was pretty difficult too. Obviously, very different game, but it's the same developer. So
I'm just gonna skim through, and it looks like for the most part, I'm on GameFAQs, and it seems like it's overall pretty good. Like I'm seeing like nines, eights, couple tens, 6,
good.
5, 7. I see 1, 2. It says this classic doesn't stand the test of time. That one was written back in 2003. Even, oh my God, really? Man, somebody had a bug up their ass that day. Good
Well, I was gonna
lord.
say, are they blaming it on a bad Wii port or something for that time frame?
Yeah, I guess. Here's one from 2014 even that says it's a 9. They're giving it a 9, saying that they love this classic game. So I mean,
Even the aesthetic too, that's not something I feel like a lot of people talk about, but like just like I don't even know how to name the aesthetic that it belongs to, but like just like it feels like it's like a dingy, dark game. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
it doesn't feel like Mario with all the colors and all this
yeah,
sort of stuff, right? Like it's all
yeah,
dark tones and
yep,
browns and all that, right?
yep.
So,
It is,
yeah.
and it does. It's got it feels like how it should feel because I shouldn't say most. I take it back. I shouldn't say most. Depending on what the story is, that's the thing. It all goes back to the story. Whatever the story is supposed to be, hopefully the color scheme follows suit and it gives you the vibes of what the story
Exactly.
feels like. And people tend to overlook those things. And it's not about being a snob or anything. It's when you're trying to go in with the mindset of you want the most experience that you're going to gain from you playing whatever game it is that you're playing. Is there anything else that you wanted to add while I got you?
No, I mean, I guess just yeah, a great game. I guess the other thing I was going to mention too that it's sort of interesting that we talk about difficulty, right? And comparing difficulty then to now. And one of the things that I was noticing earlier too. I don't know. If, are you familiar with Quest 64 at
Oh
all?
yeah, I love Quest 64. Love it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
a
got it.
bunch of people on social media today, I happened to be seeing, were well, a lot of people were saying that it was a bad game, and I'm
Yeah,
like, I feel like
right.
everyone's calling this game a bad game, just like either thought it was too
God,
hard or didn't give it a proper
they
chance
didn't
because
give it a
it's a
chance.
fantastic
It is
game.
a good game.
Yeah,
It is a great game. I loved Quest 64. That's why that was when I rebought. I shouldn't say I bought. I bought a 64, traded it in a long time ago for some friggin' weed because I was an idiot, and so I ended up
I
buying
remember.
another. Yeah, so I bought another one when I was like 22, 23. And when I got it, Quest 64 was one of the first games I got for it because I was like, man, I love this
Nice.
game, and it was only like $5 at the time. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, oh, that's the other thing too. Like a lot, it's like it sucks. I wish I knew back then that retro collecting was going to be a thing because I didn't think it
Right?
was going to be a thing. I was like, well, I'll just get these games and then I'll just kind of get some here and there because they're only selling them for like $1 or $2 or whatever. Because like I got like every WWF and WCW wrestling game that was released on the 64. I only paid $1 for each of them. And it's like, now it's like,
nice.
you know, you're going to be paying a minimum like 10, probably it's like $5-10 easy. But, you know, then like GoldenEye got that for like $5.
Nice.
Smash Bros on the cheap. I can't remember. I know it was under 20. I know that much. Like a lot of games that I was like, holy crap, I'm glad I got them now because, man, but I do regret because there's a lot of games that I don't have that I want that I'm like, I don't want to pay that.
Oh yeah. Oh, and especially like for the NES too.
Yeah.
Like forget about it. Like because I had like that was the only console I had for so long. Like I kid you not. I'm sure in my basement at one point I must have had over 100 cartridges. Like it was nuts.
That would be nuts. That's like the thing that I'm trying to replicate for myself is I just want to look at my little museum of games and be like, oh yes. Just soak it all in, man.
Yeah, I was actually a physical media collector for quite some time, but then yeah, it just eventually I consider it laziness, I guess. And with kids, it's just everything's digital. It's all in one place. It's easy, right?
You know, that's the thing. It's like, and I get it from like your standpoint. That's where I don't beat people up too much if they say like, you know, well, I gave up on it because of X, Y, Z, and like in your case, because you know you got kids and shit, dude. Like I don't, so it's like. Okay, it's easy for me to have a little bit of extra, you know, disposable income to try to get some of the shit from my childhood that I didn't have, you know.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't beat up on anybody if they didn't do it.
Oh, exactly. And then before we run, I haven't had the proper chance to show off the shirt that I chose for. Oh wait.
Uh-oh.
No, come on, focus.
It's not one to focus. It did, but then like it went away. It was like, fuck you.
Yeah, I probably got too close. Hang on. I go.
It's coming.
There we go.
Oh, okay. There we go. There it is.
Got it. Yeah, they got a little Super Metroid shirt.
There you go. Super Metroid. That's another one that I started playing, never finished it.
Oh, you gotta finish it.
I know.
Yeah.
That was one.
Great finish too.
I never finished the first one. The first one confused the dog shit out of me.
Yeah. The first one was rough.
I'll say it confused the dog shit out of me as a kid, and it was too much for my mental capacity. So I was like,
paper maps. Yeah. Everything. My solution was paper back in the day. Yeah,
I was like, that's what I do. I said I remember people literally drawing maps of like there was this one guy. He had.
How are you gonna remember as a kid? Like honestly,
he had it. It was all arrows. Like it was just different directional arrows.
Yeah,
like,
down, up. Like, yeah, exactly.
And then, like
smart,
the squares were the room, and the edges of the paper were like the edges of the room. So it would say, you know, arrow this way. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? And he had them all taped together, and he had told me, and I was like, well, I am not doing this to beat Metroid. All right. Well, I guess that will do things for today and wrap everything up. Is there any game that you want to talk about in the future so that way, you know, kind of give a cliffhanger, so to speak, to our viewers here so that way
we just talked about Super Metroid. I could talk days about Super Metroid.
Shit. Okay. Well, yeah, we could do that. And it'll force me to have to try to go and play it. I know I won't be able to finish it right away because I know that's a very long game. At least from what I was told.
It's not too bad. It's again, if you're going for every nook and cranny, like you know, other similar games, yeah. But no, if you're focusing on objectives, it's not too bad.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe we'll see. I'll see how far I can get into it and go from there. But nonetheless, it was great having you bullshit with me about good old Faxanadu and obviously other retro nostalgia goodness that we all love and cherish dearly. And
thank you so much for having me.
Dude, that's what it's all about, man. I try telling people that because like you know, some people for whatever reason they think like, oh, you do like YouTube stuff, like then they for whatever reason assume that means I won't like just have anybody on to just talk to. I'm like, no, that's what I do this for is like it's my own enjoyment. I want to talk about stuff with people. You don't have to be another creator to talk about stuff. I don't give a shit. I'm not anybody special.
I'm trying though. Chili Dad Man, find me on socials.
There you go. See, that's what I was gonna just say. Where can the fine people find you? So
Chili Dad Man on most platforms. I'm trying to get it on everything. If not, Chili Ermac on Epic and other things. Chili K-Town Willie. That's my old handle.
there we go. All right. Well, that'll do it. Thanks again, everybody, for hanging in with us for today's podcast. If there's anything that you guys want us to talk about, whether it's me and Chili or just me and anybody in particular that's going to be on in the future, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks again for listening in and watching, and I will see you in the next video.